Necessities, the world's greatest podcast about the Coventry Bears. We live at covbearspodcast.com. We're at covbearspodcast on Twitter. You can find us in Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, Google Podcasts, plenty of other places too. And we're sponsored by the Bears Vice Presidents and by York's Tim. I'm one of your hosts, Dave Musson, and I'm here just to quickly introduce a special episode of the show this week. Obviously no game to talk about because Bears didn't play at the weekend because of the Challenge Cup. Well done to the Dragons for winning that. So we decided to come up with something a little different for you, and we tracked down the one final member of the Proper Sport Rugby League team that's yet to appear on this show. So Phil Kaplan was on this show in January, and we've spoken to Gary Schofield and to Mark Wilson in the time since. That left Richard Shaw-Wright, the guy out of the four who is actually the biggest Coventry Bears fan of the lot of them. So we got Richard on the line, and he joined us for this week's show, and that's the conversation you're about to hear. So lots of interesting stuff about the Bears, about expansion, about the women's game, about PDRL, and some other things in there too. So hope you enjoy this, and we'll be back with our regular show next week. Right, so I'm very, very pleased to welcome to the show the final member of the Proper Sport team to join Bare Necessities this season, and easily the biggest Bears fan on the entire Proper Sport team. It's Richard Shaw-Wright. Richard, welcome to Bare Necessities. How are you doing today?
I'm not too bad, Dave. Thank you very much.
So, people who have perhaps listened to the stuff you do on Proper Sport or watched the live stream they'll have heard you talking about the Bears, and they may even have seen you wearing your Bears baseball cap with pride on the live streams. I'm guessing our club made quite a good impression on you when you came to visit for the Bradford game in June.
Yeah, the hat is alongside me right now as I sit here at home. I was invited down by the club, which was very nice, and a great experience down in Coventry. Obviously, Proper Sport were there to broadcast the game for the Bulls, but I was, as Sco would say, enjoying a bit of hospitality. And the thing that struck me is when you get there, it's a proper ground. There's great facilities there for the level of rugby being played, and certainly, as a Wakefield fan, there's probably better facilities than we have at our ground at home at the Mobile Rocket Stadium at Bellevue these days. But what struck me was the friendliness of the people there, and people coming up to have a chat about rugby, and people who've never been to a rugby league game before just wanting to enjoy the experience and see, a big team as they were and may well be again in the Bulls. And hopefully people who enjoyed that game went on to watch the Bears' great run of form and those consecutive victories following that. So it was a great experience. Met a lot of great people, and really enjoyed my time in Coventry. And I was there a couple of years ago for the game during the Four Nations, the double-header there at the Ricoh Arena. And it's just disappointing we haven't been back since with another big game. I think the semi-finals we had at Bolton a couple of weeks ago would have been perfect in the big stadium in Coventry, because I have to say the press facilities there were absolutely superb. But the viewing points, the stadium itself, the location, obviously it's out of town, but plenty of parking around. It was a great location, and you can see that with all the hard work people are putting in behind the scenes at the Bears, and if they can get a little bit more help, which I think is needed everywhere, then the Bears can certainly capitalise on what they've got so far. Because you look at a club who obviously aren't winning hundreds of games a season, they aren't challenging for the title, but they've got a loyal fan base, and it's a great family atmosphere, and you can see people wanting to go and watch the Bears in that facility.
Did you know much about the Bears before you came down in June?
Not too much, to be honest, other than that they've been around for a few years now, and obviously in League One, which is a fascinating competition. I think, as we've spoken on the Monday night before, Phil certainly mentioned it before, hasn't he, that there's almost two divisions in there. When League One was set up, or National League 3 or whatever it was at the time, as a development division, there was an obvious reason for that, and now you've got a development division that also includes one of the biggest clubs in the sport in Bradford, for reasons everyone knows about, but also the Cumbrian clubs, the likes of Keighley and Oldham, who obviously don't want to be in there, but the structure means they have to be, and the likes of Coventry and Newcastle. Obviously I went up to there earlier in the season and can see they're doing great things, and obviously there's a great similarity in terms of having the use of a quality facility from a rugby union club there, but they're doing great things off the field as well, and that's the thing that struck me when I got there. I didn't know too much, but you see all the kids running around and people enjoying themselves, and you thought, if I lived in Coventry, I'd want to come down here because everyone looks like having a great time. And it would be nice to see that kind of thing recognised by the sport and by people inside the sport. We hear all the time, and I'm sure you read about it. We've got all the stuff about Toronto at the moment, and I've never been and probably never will get over to Toronto, but they're doing what they're doing. And everyone seems to, a lot of people seem to have a go at them just because they're not from the heartlands of Rugby League. But we looked at what Coventry are doing, what Newcastle are doing, and you know, the thing that struck me at the weekend, and we had the message into the studio on Monday after the West Wales game against Coventry. And you look at the fact that West Wales have never won a game, they're a brand new club, never won a game, but still, 400, 500 people went to watch a game against Coventry. And obviously something's been done there. It's not as if tens of thousands of people are watching, but there's obviously a passionate base of people outside of the heartlands who want to watch Rugby League, and we should be doing all we can to encourage those clubs to get more people through the gates.
Yeah, and I was at the West Wales game. I travelled down with the team, and yeah, it was a good crowd, really similar to Coventry, really. A really friendly atmosphere, passionate fans, passionate enough to actually give the Bears fans a bit of stick during the game, which is always a good sign. So so some good stuff. And I always find it interesting when I listen to you guys on the Monday night show. I don't know whether just picking the faults of the people who have got issues with the expansion side of the game, because it just seems to be there's a big, but I'm quite a non-traditional rugby league fan, given that I support Coventry and live in the Midlands, and I've come to it fairly recently, and I don't seem to have that inherent cynicism or just grumpiness that some Heartland fans have. Do you think there's anything clubs like the Bears can do that can ever win over that type of rugby league fan, or is it just worth concentrating on the ones who are more open to this as an idea?
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. The people who are unhappy about new people coming in and new teams coming in don't really get where the sport needs to go. They want the sport to grow, but with the best will in the world, it's not going to grow in the areas we've got at the moment, because we've had 120 odd years to sort out these clubs. Some of them are successful, some of them are not, but we need new blood into the sport, and whether that's new clubs and new people mainly watching. And people always say, well, why don't we have a game a week on TV or whatever? Why has the Championship not got a TV deal? And the stark reality is, you look at the figures for the attendances in the Championship, and they don't necessarily justify live TV coverage, and certainly don't justify the cost of live TV coverage, which is where you look at what's happened with Bulls Live and Proper Sport. Is you just need a couple of cameras and a bit of technical equipment and know-how and a stable internet connection, and you've got a live coverage of teams that people want to watch. And how that will go forward from there, I'm not sure. But I'm not sure Coventry, West Wales, North Wales, Toulouse, Catalan's even getting stick now, and the south of France is one of the heartland areas of rugby league, but they're foreign, so we have to have a go at them. So whatever these clubs do will never make people happy. I think it's more important that, in the mid-90s, there was a lot of hype. I live in Wakefield, but I used to listen to the radio station that covered Sheffield, Hallam FM, and there was a lot of hype on there about ice hockey, because the Sheffield Steelers were a brand new club. I think they were formed in 1991, and much like Toronto, say, came in with a lot of hype, had the new arena in Sheffield at the time, signed a lot of players and dominated games because they were able to go full time or spend more money on players than anyone else, a bit like Toronto have done. And traditional fans didn't like them because they brought a lot of razzmatazz, a lot of show business to the whole game presentation. And this is a thing where I've said before on a Monday, rugby league clubs, I think, at times rely on people just to turn up because it's rugby league, and you can't do that in 2018. People need another reason to spend their money because there's so many options. We probably have all got some form of subscription television or Netflix or Amazon Prime or this and that and the other. So we've got enough options to sit at home and not even go out of the house to entertain ourselves. We have to give people another reason to go and watch a rugby league game, because a League One game might not be what's going to drag people off the streets for a Championship game, or even a Super League game, as we've seen with some of the attendances in the top flight. So I don't think we do enough to get new people in, and that's the key for what we need to do. And eventually, Sheffield, the hype wore away with the hockey, but they still got a a good club and good attendances, and selling tickets for a fiver to some of the games this year, so I'm going to go along and watch again. But we need to attract new people, and somehow you're not going to keep everyone who comes in, but if you do offer cheap tickets or whatever, you have to make sure that the people, even if the result doesn't go their way, that they have a good time watching it.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the live streaming, and obviously I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, we're big fans of the live streams on this podcast, and it's drawn thousands of pairs of eyes to League One this season, and for clubs like the Bears, it's been amazing to have that many people get exposed to the Bears brand and the Bears team and the Bears the way they go about things. You're obviously biased in this because you're in it, but it feels like live streaming is a big part of how this sport can grow in this country, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think, and less so with the Bulls and more with the Women's Challenge Cup final we were involved with a couple of weeks ago over at Warrington. I think it's really opened my eyes to things, because if you look, and this is what I've said before on a Monday night as well, if we're looking at the whole sport moving forward, we certainly need to make more of Women's Super League, because it's women's sport is a massive growth area in the media at the moment. And things like the PDRL, the Physical Disability Rugby League, which if you've never seen is amazing to watch. It is rugby league, albeit with people with legs and arms missing, and that sounds a ridiculous way to describe it, but that is the best way to describe it. It's still rugby league. And we need to do as much to promote these things as possible. And there isn't room on BBC One prime time on a Saturday afternoon to show a Women's Super League game or whatever, or on ITV, you've shown no interest in rugby league for a long time, or Channel 4 or Channel 5, unless we can get a deal the RFU have got to show the Premiership on Channel 5, it's not going to happen. So streaming, especially, and people who listen on a Monday night will know my views on certain elements of the BBC. I'm not as bad as it comes across. But if we as a sport had some kind of deal where we were streaming games via the BBC Sport website, and I don't mean Super League, I mean the lower divisions, I mean the women's game, I mean PDRL or whatever. As long as we have the ability to put together a professional stream, which I'd like to think that our coverage of the Women's Challenge Cup finals certainly gave the game the respect and the quality of coverage it deserved. And that's, I think, if you're on the BBC website, if you're a sport on their website, they're going to tweet about you. They're going to put the highlights on their website. The Women's Cup final highlights are still on there. You can still watch the whole thing, I think, at the moment. But they will give it promotion through Twitter that you can't get through anyone else, pretty much. And I can't think of anyone who is a sportsman in this country who doesn't follow BBC Sport on Twitter. So to get those eyes on you, and then again, streaming it through Facebook, you've got the ability that if you're a fan, you share it, someone sees it in your timeline, they might click on and watch, they might enjoy it, they might not. But it's an easier way than asking someone to pay 40, 50 quid a month to a TV provider. I've seen on my feed on Facebook before the championship games from Rugby Union, and I've watched for a little bit just to see what they do. Obviously, I've not got too much interest in the championship Rugby Union since I stopped covering it a long time ago when Wakefield lost their club. But it's a new way of finding an audience. How many people just sit there on their phones all day, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and we have to exploit that audience. We have to get in there now. This is my concern with Women's Rugby League, is that we may have missed the boat, because at the start of the season, the rights were up for tender. I think, as we've said on the show on Monday, the RFL were asking a lot of money, which we didn't pay, and then no one paid. And now every club's doing their own little bit, and there's no real synergy to everything. You need a straightforward. The RFL need to stand up and say, this is what we're going to do. Yes, you can do your own little bits, but we want a game here. We'll put it on the Our League app. We'll put it here. We'll put it there. And that's how we're going to grow new audiences through the various points of the game. And if that does mean Championship and League One games on the BBC website, I know there's obviously a problem with the Championship and the TV deal with Sky. And people blame Sky for that, but it's Sky's prerogative to buy rights and not use them. We shouldn't have just we as a sport, shouldn't have just thrown those rights in there and say, have these rights to the Championship. You don't have to do anything bar the bash. I think that's somewhere where we have to blame the sport rather than Sky as a broadcaster. So I think streaming very much is the future. My colleague Tom Maguire has written a great article in 4020 magazine this month. I'll just put that as well for Phil, seeing as he's not here. How we move on from there, I don't know. I'm not a great marketing person, but certainly it opened my eyes just seeing the fact that being on the BBC website, and we don't just have to be on the BBC, we can be wherever we want, but the fact that they gave promotion to the Women's Cup finals said that if we had a product we could give or monetize via our sport, and it may well be that the rights to League One are worth £0, and that's up to people to decide. But if we put a game, and obviously Coventry were on early in the season, weren't they, in the Challenge Cup on the BBC website. If we have those games out there, people can watch, people can perhaps go, oh, I'm interested in this rugby league, this looks good, I might go down and watch. So we just got to get our sport into the eyes of more people, and I think streaming is certainly the way to do that at the moment.
Do you think with the women's game and with PDRL, I mean, I agree they're both boom areas. Do you think in terms of geographical location for those teams, they can get away with sort of dodging this expansion versus heartlands battle, and just, do you think they're strong enough to flourish anywhere, or on the other hand, do you think they actually need to be driven by traditional clubs at this point right now to establish their presence a bit more?
I think the name helps, doesn't it? I think if you mentioned Wigan to people, and Wigan are the obvious example to use because of their dominance 25, 30 years ago, people will still know who Wigan are, they'll know who Leeds are, they'll know who St Helens are. Certainly when, I'd imagine if you said to people, what do you know about St Helens, what do you know about Wigan, one of the first things they'd say is either Rugby League or, in St Helens' case, Johnny Vegas. But, excuse me, I think the great thing Women's Super League has done this season and in the last couple of years is clubs have either changed their name. I think it was Saints, Worthato, Heath, who were, are a big amateur club. But as soon as you give that brand to them, and I spoke to one of the players at the launch at the start of the season, they were excited about wearing the colours of the club they support. So I think we need those brands, but there's no reason why we can't have Coventry Bears women, North Wales women, who possibly in the future the women's teams might be playing at a higher level than the men in that sense. And there's no reason why we can't promote the sport. I think football's got this problem at the moment, hasn't there, where they're wanting the big names in. Man United have set up a team this time for the first time in a long time, but they almost destroying, I don't know if that's too harsh a word, but some of the traditional teams, Doncaster Bells are the obvious team everyone remembers as a big force in women's football. Again, probably the same era when Wigan were winning. But they're now, cast aside to promote these big brand names. But I think we need to rely on the big brands at the moment, but there's no reason why we can't have Women's Rugby League, PDRL or whatever, everywhere in the sport. And in a sense, I think they can, in areas outside, push the sport to a new level. And you only have to look at the work Widnes have done this year in terms of their women's side, and I saw them get well beaten at Wakefield earlier in the season in the Championship. But they've brought in, I think they've said 30 players to Rugby League this year who've never played before, 16 from Widnes. So there's got to be people out there, whether they are women, whether they are physically disabled, learning disabled, because there's LDRL as well, that want to play a sport. And that sport may be Rugby League, and we've just got to get the sport out there to as many different people as possible.
Yeah, good stuff. So let's I'll bring it back onto the Bears for my last few questions. So just wanted to get your thoughts on where they're at right now, really, because this season, the Bears they not only won a Challenge Cup match for the first time, they made it to the 5th round for the first time in their history, and after they beat West Wales last time out, that meant that they'd secured more league wins than they got for the whole of last season. So there's actual tangible progress there from year to year. From what you saw on your visit and what you saw of them on the pitch, what do you think the Bears might need to keep that upward curve going next year? Is it a case of trying to keep a core group of the squad together, because the team have always had to start from scratch previously? Or, I mean, obviously aside from the obvious of a big injection of cash, is there anything you thought when you were down here that you thought a sprinkling of that and that they could be onto something there?
I think it's one of those difficult things, isn't it? Because you look at how the club has developed without spending money they haven't got and trying to bring in big name players or whatever. And you think, why change what's working in a sense? I mean, it depends on where do Coventry want to be. If Coventry as a club are happy to grow, and you get the feeling the supporters aren't on the owner's back, are they, saying, well, you need to spend all this money on great players and bring in some Aussies or whatever and make us a side challenging for the top of League One, because that's not sustainable. But if you build slowly, and I go back to Wakefield as an example, because I've been watching them for nearly 30 years now, which is far too long. The thing they've had in the last few years is stability, and I think that's possibly going to be the key for Coventry as well. If you can keep that group of players together who've helped you get to where you are, and add a few in who can improve them, then you're always going to either move forward slowly or get a nice jump on the rest of the sides. League One's going to be a fascinating competition next year, because one of York and Bradford are going to be out of there, possibly both. The teams coming down in Swinton and Rochdale, it seems at the moment anyway, are going to be interesting. Rochdale obviously losing their coach and how they react to that, and being back in the third tier. So there isn't going to be necessarily a massively standout team like Bradford in there. So it might give the likes of Coventry, London Scholars, Newcastle, although Newcastle probably a bit further ahead at the moment, aren't they? Certainly in terms of signing the likes of Liam Finn for next year. Unless Liam Finn's coming to Coventry instead, I don't know. But it might give the likes of the Coventry, of West Wales, North Wales, etc., more chances to win games, which I think is what we need, isn't it? We need a closer competition. It's how you do that at the financial level and without ruining what you've already got. And I think that was the impressive thing at Coventry is, on the field, they played an exciting brand of rugby. I enjoyed watching the game. And if you're not going to win every week, you need to give the fans something to enjoy, and certainly I think that would get people in to watch them. And what I do like is the fact that they are going out into the world of students and giving those an opportunity to perhaps play at a semi-pro level, which has got to be a great way of finding talent, especially people coming in perhaps from rugby union, perhaps have never played rugby league before. It's, again, another way the sport can find different people to bring in as either spectators or players. So I think consistency is the main thing, but what happens from there, I'm just glad that there's no great concern about spending cash on players that may or may not get Coventry into 6th or 7th or something. And what's the real point wasting money on talent to not actually win anything, but still only progress you a small amount?
Yeah. So obviously you'll have been aware when you came down to visit that this season is the Bears' 20th anniversary season, and I'm going to ask you a question I've been asking all of the guests on the podcast this year. Do you have a birthday message for the Bears?
Happy birthday, keep going. The food was lovely. Everyone should go and enjoy the hospitality at some point. I actually picked up I'm a program collector, I'm a program hoarder, and I picked up 3 boxes last week from a gentleman in Normanton, which your audience might not know. He's somewhere near Castleford, between Castleford and Wakefield. And one of the programs in there is a Challenge Cup first round tie from 2003-04. Coventry Bears at the Featherstone Lions. I've actually got it in my hand now. So to see this lovely printed program, which if you haven't got, I will happily send you in the post, because my wife will be very happy for me to get rid of some more stuff. It's great to see Coventry flying high, going from the excitement of National League 3 and Challenge Cup ties at Featherstone to winning a Challenge Cup tie, going to Widnes. The players must be gutted now, seeing how Widnes's form has been this year, that they haven't managed to get points in that game. But we my birthday message is going on far too long now. But we wish Coventry all the best. The hat's wonderful. I'm glad I paid for it. I bought a shirt as well, an old plain shirt, which was far too small for me, but I've given to my nephew, and he's a kind of honorary Bears fan as well now. I say we, I don't know, I guess I'm a supporter now. I just wish all the best for the future, and the fact that we're hopefully in another 20, 25, 30, 40 years' time, if we're all here, we can all chat again about the great times at Coventry, and perhaps well, who knows where rugby league's going to be in 30 years' time. When I started watching in the early 90s, how would I have ever imagined that there was a potential next year that my team, Wakefield, would be playing Toronto? Even playing a team from France, we used to play Carcassonne in the Regal Trophy or the Challenge Cup every once in a blue moon. But to actually have a team from North America, teams from France, the most exciting thing that happened in the first season I was watching was the fact there was a team in Scarborough who only lasted the season. So we should be thankful. In this box of programmes, Dewsbury were playing at, they were doing their stadium up, they were playing at Batley, and they had visits from teams who don't exist anymore, like of Highfield, Trafford Borough, Chorley Borough, which is a great story. Any of the listeners who've never read into that, it's a ridiculous thing. Nottingham City, who obviously, I guess are a bit far away, but my geography isn't great these days. And and the fact that Coventry Bears have managed to last all this time and are still growing and are still going is a credit to everyone involved in the club, and possibly, definitely, should be given more praise from people inside Rugby League who I don't think realise the great work the like of Coventry are doing, in so much as spreading the great word of our sport.
Great stuff. And lastly, Richard, I just want to throw a bit of a cheeky question your way to finish. So I want you to imagine the scene. Challenge Cup 6th round 2019, and the Bears get drawn against Wakefield. Who are you going to shout for in that one?
Well, it would be Wakefield because I always have a bet on them every year to win the cup, and I always get disappointed. But I wouldn't be overly disappointed if Coventry won. And having seen Wakefield against London Scholars when John Keir was in charge, that'll be 10 years or so ago now, and we were dreadful in that game. So there's always a chance that Coventry could pull off the upset. So it wouldn't be a massive surprise. But I might take my hat just in case. And if it all goes wrong for Wakefield, I'll just put it on, and no one will be any the wiser.
Brilliant stuff. Richard, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you joining us on the podcast. It's been a really interesting chat. Just before you go, can you give a quick plug as to where people can find out a bit more about Proper Sport in terms of because obviously you've got the podcast, you've got the Monday night show and the live streams and stuff. So just give a quick plug to wherever you can find stuff. Yeah,
the website is propersport.uk, at Propersport. I'm at the RSW. And our Rugby League coverage is at RL on RY, which is our old Twitter feed that we can't be bothered changing the name of because lots of people still follow it. So it's always best to see what we're up to by heading there, and I'm sure it'd be worth looking at in the coming weeks and months as we head towards the end of the season.
Great stuff. Richard, thanks again for your time, and hopefully seeing Coventry sometime soon.
No problem at all. Looking forward to it.